The Bible is one of the most important books in human history. Over 2 billion copies have been sold. It has shaped laws, art, language, and entire civilizations. But most people have no idea how it was actually made. Here is the truth. The Bible was not written by one person, in one place, at one time. It is a collection of books written over roughly 1,500 years by more than 40 different authors on 3 different continents. Today, we are going to break down exactly how that happened, step by step. Before anything was written down, stories were told out loud. People passed them from parent to child, generation to generation. This is called oral tradition. The Bible itself started this way. The early accounts of the Old Testament, stories about creation, Noah, Abraham, and the early Israelites, were passed down by word of mouth for centuries before anyone wrote them down. Eventually, these stories were recorded. The first person credited with writing parts of the Bible is Moses. He is traditionally linked to the first 5 books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. This section is called the Torah in Hebrew, or the Pentateuch in Greek. Both words simply mean 5 books. The writing of what we call the Old Testament did not happen all at once. It was a very long process. Scholars estimate that parts of the Hebrew Bible were composed as early as 1200 BCE, that is over 3,000 years ago. Some of the oldest material includes poems and songs like the Song of Deborah, found in the Book of Judges. The books were written in Hebrew, with small sections in Aramaic. They were written by many different people: prophets, priests, kings, and scribes. Some books document history. Others contain poetry, wise sayings, laws, and messages from prophets. Here is how some key sections came together. The Torah, the first 5 books, was largely accepted as official scripture by the Jewish community around the 5th century BCE. Books like 1 and 2, Kings and 1 and 2 and Chronicles were probably compiled during the Babylonian exile, a period beginning in the 6th century BCE when the Jewish people were taken captive to Babylon. Scribes gathered older texts, royal records, and prophetic writings to piece these books together. The second major section, the Nevi'im, the prophets, was accepted as canon around the 3rd century BCE. The third section, the Ketuvim, the writings, which includes Psalms, Proverbs, and other books, rounded out the Hebrew Bible. The final book of the Old Testament, Malachi, was written around 430 BCE. By around 290 BCE, the content of the Old Testament was largely agreed upon, about 40 years after the last book was written. People did not have printing presses. Every word was written by hand. Writers used ink on specially prepared animal skins. These were rolled up into scrolls. Because the scrolls wore out over time, specially trained writers called scribes made exact copies. When a copy was finished, the old scroll was often destroyed so only the new, accurate copy would be used. Scribes took their job very seriously. This was not a casual job, it was a sacred duty. They counted every letter to make sure copies were accurate. The group most well known for this careful work was called the Masoretes, a group of Jewish scribes who were active from around the 6th to the 10th century CE. They added vowel signs to the Hebrew text and maintained strict rules for copying. In the 3rd century BCE, something important happened. The Hebrew Bible was translated into Greek. This translation is called the Septuagint. It was created because, after Alexander the Great conquered much of the known world, Greek became the common language across many regions. Jewish communities living outside of Israel no longer spoke Hebrew as their first language. They needed a version they could read. The Septuagint became hugely important, not just for Jewish communities, but for early Christians too. When Christianity began to spread through the Roman world, the Septuagint was the version of the Old Testament that early Christians used. The New Testament covers the life of Jesus and the growth of the early Christian church. Compared to the Old Testament, it was written in a much shorter time. The first New Testament writings were the letters of the Apostle Paul. These are called the epistles. Paul's letters were written and distributed to churches around 50 CE, possibly just before Paul's death. Churches copied the letters and passed them around. Over time, letters were collected into books. The 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, were written about 40 years after Paul's earliest letters. They tell the story of Jesus' life, teachings, death, and resurrection. They were not written by people who sat down fresh and made up stories. Luke, for example, clearly states he spent time gathering information and interviewing eyewitnesses before writing his account. By the 2nd century CE, the 4 Gospels, the Book of Acts, and Paul's 13 letters were already being circulated and read in Christian churches across the known world. The Muratorian canon, believed to date to around 200 CE, is the earliest known list of New Testament books that closely matches what we have today. The last New Testament book was completed around 90 CE. The entire New Testament was written in Koine Greek, the common street-level Greek of the time. Here is where things get interesting. There were many more writings floating around than what ended up in the Bible. So who decided which books were in and which were out? This process is called canonization, officially deciding which books belong. For the New Testament, church leaders used specific standards. A book needed to be written by an apostle or a close associate of an apostle, be widely accepted and used by churches across many regions, teach things consistent with what Christians already believed. By around 200 CE, there was broad agreement on most of the New Testament list. In 367 CE, a church leader named Athanasius listed all 27 books of the New Testament in an Easter letter, the same 27 books that are in the New Testament today. Church councils at Hippo in 393 CE and Carthage in 397 CE confirmed this list. The full biblical canon was officially established around 400 CE. Some books were rejected, including various Gnostic texts and other writings that claimed to be written by apostles but were not widely accepted. These rejected texts are sometimes called the Apocrypha. Some of them, like the Gospel of Mary, were discovered in Egypt in 1896. 50 additional unused texts were found in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, in 1945. For a long time, people questioned whether the Bible had been changed over thousands of years of hand copying. Then in 1947, something remarkable happened. A Bedouin shepherd threw a rock into a cave near the Dead Sea and heard the sound of breaking pottery. Inside were clay jars containing ancient scrolls. Between 1947 and 1956, about 981 manuscripts were found in 11 caves near a place called Qumran. These became known as the Dead Sea Scrolls. The scrolls date from roughly 250 BCE to 100 CE. They include fragments from every book of the Old Testament except the Book of Esther. The most famous is the Great Isaiah Scroll, a complete copy of the Book of Isaiah dating to about 150 BCE. Before 1947, the oldest known complete Hebrew Bible was the Leningrad Codex, dated to 1008 CE. That is more than 1,000 years newer than the Isaiah Scroll. When scholars compared the two, they found the texts were virtually identical, word for word, across more than a millennium of hand copying. This was a major discovery. It proved that scribes had been extraordinarily accurate in preserving the text over centuries. By around the 4th and 5th century CE, scrolls had been replaced by books, bound pages called codices. The Bible as a complete physical book began to take shape. The full structure of the Bible we know today was finalized around 400 CE. For over 1,000 years after that, the Bible existed only in Latin, a language most ordinary people could not read. Monks and scholars had access to it, but common people did not. That changed slowly. In the 7th century CE, a monk named Bede translated the Gospel of John into Old English. In the 14th century, John Wycliffe produced the first complete Bible in English. Authorities considered this dangerous. In 1408, a law was passed banning unauthorized translations. In the 16th century, William Tyndale printed an English New Testament in Germany and smuggled copies into England. He was later arrested and executed for it. In 1611, the King James Bible was published. It became one of the most widely read books in the English language and shaped English itself.